Today in this 2012 Jeep Liberty, we'll be having a look at and showing you how to install the SMI Air Force One supplemental braking system for motorhomes with air brakes, part number SM99243. And in this particular case, we're working with a 2007 Fleetwood Revolution motorhome on a Spartan chassis. The Air Force One is a great solution for those of you that need a supplemental braking system to help you keep safe and legal when flat towing your Jeep Liberty behind your motorhome that has air brakes. The greatest thing about the Air Force One is that there's only one difference that you have after you've already hooked your Liberty up than how you did it before. And that is your airline umbilical between your motorhome and your Liberty. You'll just simply remove the dust cap that protects the fitting on the back of the motorhome. You'll push in the hose, pull back, make sure it's secure, and we'll do the same on the Liberty. And just like that, you're now ready to tow. The Air Force One even comes with a breakaway switch and a cable to attach to your motorhome. So in the unlikely event that your Liberty ever became disconnected from the motorhome, the breakaway switch would become pulled and it would apply the brakes in the Liberty, bringing it to a stop. Here's what the SMI Air Force One looks like installed on our Liberty. This is a truly proportional supplemental braking system that will apply the brakes in your Liberty at the exact amount and the exact time as you're applying the brakes in your motorhome, allowing you to bring your vehicle to a safe and smooth stop behind you. The brakes inside our Liberty are applied via this air-operated cylinder, which will pull our brake pedal down to apply the brakes in a manner which matches the brakes being applied in our motorhome. What's great about this system compared to other options on the market is not only is this a truly proportional unit, but you don't have to worry about using a portable braking system and having to clamp something onto your brake pedal every time you want to use it. Once this is installed, that's it. There is no additional setup, no maintenance, nothing that's required in order to use it every time you hook up to your motorhome. For this particular flat tow setup, in addition to the SMI Air Force One, we used a Blue Ox base plate kit, the Blue Ox Avail tow bar, a Roadmaster 7-to-6 diode wiring kit, a Roadmaster brake light relay. And in some applications, you may or may not need a high-low adapter to maintain a proper height for your tow bar.
So I'm here with Phil, who just purchased the Air Force One braking system. Phil, what do you think about the Air Force One? Why did you choose it over something else?
Well, one reason, it's proportional, and since I have a motorhome, and I do have air brakes on it, this actually works off an air system. And whereas the other ones that I've looked at, you either have to set something in by the seat and then adjust it, whereas this one, you just hook it up to your unit, and there's one item to actually hook up, which is the airline, and that's it. And also, it's been highly recommended, by even other people that I know that's bought brand new units, on their motorhomes. Almost all that I've spoke with, have got the Air Force One because of the notoriety of it, and also because I think of good publicity on it and good feedback, from consumers.
Right, it is a really good and popular system as well, and I think you're going to like it a lot. Well, thanks for your time, Phil.
Thank you all very much.
To begin our install, we'll be working with our motorhome first. We need to find a place to mount our air tank. We mounted ours behind the storage compartment here, where it's be out of the way. So here's our tank mounted to the back side of that storage compartment. We used our provided hardware to secure it to the compartment with our bolts coming out from the inside of the compartment, that way we don't lose any of our valuable space inside of it. This hose here is our output line, which goes to the back of our motorhome, and we use that to hook up our umbilical to our Liberty. You'll want to make sure you route this hose to the back of your motorhome, avoiding any places that it will be coming in contact with sources of heat, such as the exhaust or any moving parts. We secured ours in place with a couple loom clamps, working our way back. You can also use zip ties. For our fitting, we have it secured to the side of our receiver on our fascia covering here, using the provided bolts and washers that come with it. We just drilled 2 holes to secure it in place, and we plugged our air line into this fitting. You can see where our air line goes into our fitting. This is a simple push lock fitting. You just push the air hose in all the way until it stops, and then you can pull back on it to make sure it's secure. And we have 2 more air line connections on our tank. This is our supply line hose, and this one here is our metered air line hose. We have both of these lines routed towards the front of the motorhome where they tie into our existing air lines for our braking system. This is our fitting for our supply line. We cut the existing supply line hose and installed our Union T fitting here. Again, these are the push lock fittings where you simply push in until it stops. So we put that in place in line on the existing hose and then plugged in our supply line hose going to our tank right here. This is the fitting for our metered air connection. We installed this between our valve assemblies on the bottom and at the top, and we'll be sure to use thread sealant tape on all of our fittings. That way that we don't have to worry about any airline leaks. Then we plugged in our metered airline connection into this fitting. Now on the car side of things, there's a few components we need to concern ourselves with mounting. The first one is our operating unit right here. We have ours held in place with some hook and loop fasteners to the top of our fuse box right here. This will make it easy for us to remove if we ever need to service our fuses or to service our operating unit itself. The next item is our breakaway switch. We have ours mounted to the breakaway switch bracket that came with our base plate, and that was secured to the bumper beam on our vehicle, and we use a provided hardware to hold it in place. The next item on the front of the vehicle is our air line fitting, which will serve as the connection point on our Liberty between our motor home. We have that secured to our base plate using a no-drill mounting bracket that we have available on our website. That's clamped to it, and then we have our airline fitting secured with the provided hardware to that bracket. There's 2 items inside the vehicle we need to concern ourselves with mounting. The first one is our indicator light. This will alert us via our coach's rear view camera system when the brakes are being applied in our Liberty. This sticks to the back of a rear view mirror with the double-sided tape, which is already attached. The wire for our indicator light gets tucked inside our headliner, works its way across to our driver's side, goes behind our A-pillar here, and we have it zip tied to the radio antenna wire that runs down our A-pillar here. That way we avoid our airbag in case our airbag was to ever deploy. The next item we have is our cylinder. This clamps to our brake pedal and is attached to our firewall with a self-tapping screw, and that serves as the anchor point to pull our brake pedal down in order to apply the brakes. When we mount our cylinder, we want to mount it as low as possible to ensure the most leverage on our brakes, but yet still maintain enough room so it's not in the way of our feet as we're driving the vehicle normally. You'll want to make sure that the cable that leaves the cylinder is in as straight a line as possible when the pedal is depressed and the cylinder pulls back. You'll also want to make sure that you have a little bit of slack in the cable. About a ½ inch will be sufficient. We have 2 wires that leave our indicator light, a red and a black one. The red one will go to the black wire on our reed switch, which is mounted on our cylinder, and the black one will go to the blue wire of a reed switch. We also have another black wire that leaves that butt connector and is grounded to the vehicle's sheet metal, and this will provide the ground for our indicator light to work properly. And the brown wire for our reed switch goes to a brown wire that we routed through the firewall. This is the black wire from our indicator light that goes to our ground. We just use a ring terminal to attach it underneath the nut that holds our steering shaft in place. The brown wire from our reed switch comes out of our firewall through this existing grommet right here. If your vehicle has a manual transmission, you won't have this grommet because that's where your clutch master cylinder will be bolted to the firewall. We brought the brown wire alongside our fender, around our battery here, brought it over to where our breakaway switch wires come up. It ties in with the orange and black wire from our breakaway switch. We used a heat shrink butt connector, which we have available on our website, and attach those two to the provided fuse holder, which is then attached to the positive terminal of our battery using one of the ring terminals. Okay, we have on our table here 3 pieces of wire, so we can show you how to use butt connectors to make electrical connections with different wires. We have our standard butt connector here, which would be what comes with your kit most of the time. And then we have a heat shrink butt connector, which we have available on our website. We'll show you how to use both of these. We'll start by taking one of our wires. We'll strip off the insulation from one end. Make sure it's twisted together nice and tight. This is our standard butt connector. We'll start with this one. Place it over the wire and we'll crimp it down. We'll now take another wire, strip off the ends of that one. We'll insert that into the other end of our butt connector and we'll crimp it. We now have joined 2 wires together to form an electrical connection. This style of butt connector is perfectly acceptable to use in the inside of a vehicle. Because it's not exposed to the elements, you don't have to worry about dirt, debris, or moisture getting inside, causing a poor connection. Now, if we're using a butt connection underneath the vehicle or underneath the hood where it's more exposed to the elements, that's where a heat shrink butt connector comes into play and is more useful. So we'll strip off insulation from one end of the wire, and just like the other one, we'll install the butt connector, crimp it, take our last segment of wire, strip back insulation, install it in the butt connector, and we'll crimp it. Now, in order to get a proper seal on our heat shrink butt connector, we need to shrink it down. Now, the preferred method of doing this is using a heat gun. Because a heat gun is a source of indirect heat and not a direct flame, it won't damage the connector. We have heat guns available on our website. As we apply heat, we'll just rotate it back and forth to make sure it's evenly shrunk down all the way around the wire. Once we start to see this clear liquid ooze out of the back of the connector, that means we have it heat shrinked enough that it'll provide a superior seal and protection from the elements. This connection will last for the life of the vehicle. The blue wire from our breakaway switch, we used a smaller gauge 14 to 16 gauge butt connector and attached it to one of the black wires from our operating unit. It doesn't matter which black wire you use, they both serve the same purpose, so just use one of them. The other black wire from our operating unit we have attached to a ring terminal that goes to the negative terminal of our battery. This will provide a ground for our operating unit so it functions properly. And that covers all the electrical connections that we have to make. As far as plumbing goes, we have a couple connections we need to make. The first one that we made is in our vehicle's brake booster hose line that goes from the brake booster to the engine's intake manifold. We put one cut in it right here and installed one of our check valves with the black side facing towards the engine. We put another cut in place where we installed our T-fitting, where our brake booster hoses go back together. We then have another section of hose that comes off the T-fitting, goes towards our operating unit, and about 3 inches away from the operating unit, we installed another check valve with the black side facing the operating unit. Then we have a small section of hose which goes to the vacuum port on the operating unit. For demonstration purposes, we're going to show you how to make the vacuum connections underneath the hood of your vehicle off the vehicle so you can really see what's going on. This section of hose here will represent the vacuum line that goes from the engine to your brake booster. So we'll call this end the brake booster side, this end the engine side. We'll cut the factory hose close to the engine, install a check valve. When installing the check valve, it's critical to notate that the black side of the check valve will go towards the engine. And we'll just push the factory hose back together. Now, further away from the check valve, closer to the brake booster, we'll make another cut in the factory hose. And we'll install our T-fitting. With our factory hose now pushed back together, we have one section left on our T-fitting, and this will be where the hose goes that connects to our operating unit. On the front of the vehicle, on our airline fitting, our hose plugs into the back of it. The hose works its way behind the fascia, behind our headlight assembly, comes up in front of our battery, goes around the fender, and then it plugs in to the air in port on the operating unit. The last hose we have to attach comes from the air out port of the operating unit, goes down besides our master cylinder, and then goes through the same grommet that we passed our brown wire through the firewall. After that hose comes through our firewall, we have it pass through this hole in this under dash panel, where it then plugs into our air cylinder. And that completes our look at and showing you how to install the SMI Air Force One supplemental braking system for motorhomes with air brakes, part number SM99243 on this 2012 Jeep Liberty. And in this particular case, we're working with a 2007 Fleetwood Revolution motorhome on a...
Thanks for watching. Click the link in our description below to shop, learn more, or visit us at eTrailer.com. And leave us a comment if you have any questions.